The baby's cry was the only thing that sounded alive that night. The rain fell like a curse over the village, heavy and endless, drowning the sound of everything except the faint wail coming from a dimly lit hut. In that small clay-walled room, Amma lay on a woven mat, her body trembling from the storm of pain and relief that had just passed through her. Her baby, her first child, had arrived, small and fragile, his skin glistening with the warmth of new life. The village midwife, Mama Kia, hovered over the newborn with practiced hands. She was a woman in her 50s, respected, feared, and whispered about. Her face was carved with deep lines of experience, but her eyes held a sharpness that never softened. People said she could tell whether a child would live or die the moment she touched them. Amma, still weak from labor, tried to smile. "Let me hold him," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. Mama Kia didn't answer immediately. Instead, she wrapped the child in a faded blue cloth, her hands moving quickly as if she was hiding something. "You must rest," Mama Kia finally said. "Your body is too weak. I will keep the child with me tonight, feed him, and bring him when you have your strength." Amma's heart jolted. It wasn't unusual for the midwife to keep a newborn if the mother was too ill, but something about Mama Kia's tone, too final, too closed, made her uneasy. "I can keep him here," Amma insisted, her arms stretching weakly toward the tiny bundle. "I can feed him." Mama Kia's lips curved in something between a smile and a warning. "Not tonight, Amma. The spirits are restless. A newborn should be guarded by someone who knows the old ways." Amma wanted to argue, but her body betrayed her. The exhaustion pulled her under, her eyes closing before her mind could fight. When she awoke hours later, the rain had stopped. The hut was silent. The mat beside her was empty. Her baby was gone. Amma's cry ripped through the dawn, a sound so sharp that the few early risers in the village stopped in their tracks. Neighbors rushed in, only to find Amma on her knees, clutching the blue cloth Mama Kia had used, but it was empty. When confronted, Mama Kia was calm. Too calm. She told the villagers that the child had died in the night and that she had already buried him by the river, as the old customs required. But there was no grave to be found. No witness to the burial. And no one saw the midwife for days after that. The village still smelled faintly of rain that morning, though the sun had already begun warming the mud walls of the compound. Inside Miriam's small room, her labor had stretched into the early hours, long exhausting waves of pain that left her trembling. Every time she thought the child was about to come, another hour would pass. Amina, the village midwife, moved around the room like she owned it. She spoke little, her eyes sharp, her hands quick. To the villagers, Amina was a hero. She had delivered more babies than anyone could count. But to Miriam, something about the way Amina's gaze lingered on her belly felt unsettling, as though she wasn't just helping, she was planning. When the final push came, Miriam's vision blurred with sweat and tears. She heard the cry, short, sharp, and alive. She reached out her trembling hands, but Amina didn't place the child in her arms. Instead, she wrapped the baby swiftly in a faded cloth, glanced at Miriam and said in a voice too calm for the moment, "You need to rest. I will keep the child safe until you are strong." Before Miriam could protest, the door shut. It wasn't slammed, but the sound was final, like a line being drawn between mother and child. Outside, the villagers whispered. Some said Miriam had fainted. Others claimed Amina had gone to show the baby to the elders, as was tradition. Miriam's own mother wasn't there. She had died years earlier, and her father was away in another village. Alone in that dim room, Miriam felt the air grow heavy with a kind of silence that didn't belong to joy. Hours passed. Her body ached, but her mind screamed louder. She called out Amina's name until her throat burned. No answer. By the time the door opened again, the sun was low. Amina stepped inside without the baby. She spoke softly, as if delivering bad news to someone half asleep. The child was weak. She did not survive. Miriam's world broke in that instant. Her chest heaved, her fingers clawed at the mat. She wanted to see the body, to kiss her baby's face even in death. But Amina only shook her head. "It is better this way. You must heal." Something inside Miriam told her this was a lie dressed as pity. But with her body still too weak to stand, she could only let the midwife's words settle over her like a curse. And somewhere in the distance, under the soft hum of the evening wind, she thought she heard it, the faintest cry. The days after the birth felt strange for Amina. Her body knew she had given birth, her chest ached with milk, her arms longed to cradle her child, but her home was silent. The midwife, Mama Sefiu, had insisted that she take the baby, just for a few days, to watch over his health. She had whispered, The spirits are restless, Amina. Sometimes they take newborns if the mother's compound is too quiet. Amina, still weak and dizzy from blood loss, had agreed. But now each day stretched longer. Her mat lay empty beside her, no gentle breathing of an infant, no warm little bundle to calm her heart. One afternoon she gathered her courage and walked to Mama Sefu's compound. The midwife's yard smelled faintly of goat stew and wood smoke. There, on a mat in the shade, she saw her baby, wrapped in a bright kitenge cloth she had never owned. Mama Sefu sat beside him, rocking gently, humming a lullaby Amina had never heard from her own lips. "Is he well?" Amina asked, forcing a smile. The midwife glanced up. "Very well. See how strong his legs are already? The ancestors favor him." She lifted the baby into her arms but did not hand him over. Amina reached forward, but Mama Sefu's grip tightened. "Not yet," she said softly. "His spirit is still fragile. Let him bond with the earth before he bonds with you." The words made no sense. "Mama Sefu, he is my son," Amina said, her voice trembling. The midwife's eyes hardened, though her lips stayed curved in a grandmotherly smile. "A child belongs to whoever can protect him. You have no husband, no wealth, no strength for this fight. The village will say he is better off here." Amina's heart pounded. The ground under her feet seemed to shift. She had known the midwife her whole life. She had even trusted her with her most vulnerable moments. But now she saw a new side, a woman used to control, one who believed she could decide the fate of others. That night, Amina lay awake, staring at the thatched roof. Her mind chased itself in circles. Should she tell the elders? But the midwife was respected. Her word would carry more weight than a young woman's protests. Should she go to the chief? But the chief had once called Mama Sefu, the mother of our village. Every path she imagined ended with shame for herself. Days turned into weeks. People began to greet her differently, no longer with, "How is your child?" but with, "Have you seen Mama Sefu's baby? He is growing so fast." Her child. They were calling her child the midwife's. The pain was like a stone in her chest, pressing every breath. Yet each time she saw him, she forced a smile. She feared that if she wept or raised her voice, the midwife would shut her out completely. One day in the market she overheard two women whispering. "They say the baby even looks like her," one said, nodding toward Mama Sefu, who was haggling for sweet potatoes with the boy tied to her back. "Of course he does," the other replied. "When a woman keeps a child close enough, their spirits begin to match. That's how it's meant to be." Amina felt her legs weaken. The gossip was no longer about her, it was about erasing her. That night she made a decision. If she was to bring her son home, she would have to wait. Wait for the one moment when the truth would be undeniable, when no elder, no gossip, no respected midwife could cover it with smiles and superstition. She did not know how long that moment would take to arrive. But she knew she would be ready. If you believe no mother should have to fight for her own child, then this is the moment to follow the journey, because what's coming will shake the whole village. The sound came suddenly, high, sharp, and yet strangely soft, like the wind slipping through the thatched eaves. The baby was here. Adissa's heart raced as the midwife held up the newborn, wrapped in an old indigo cloth. "It's a boy," Mbaya said, smiling faintly, but there was a flicker in her eyes, something that didn't match the tone of her voice. Adissa reached out with trembling hands, tears already rolling down her cheeks. She had imagined this moment for so long, the weight of him in her arms, the smell of new life, the warmth of her own blood made flesh. But instead of placing the child in her hands, Mbaya stepped back. "This child is not for you," the midwife whispered. The words didn't make sense. Adissa's breath caught. "What? What are you saying?" "That's my child." Mbaya's voice hardened. "This boy came into the world carrying an omen. If he stays with you, he will not live past the next moon." Adissa's mind reeled. "You can't be serious." "I've been delivering babies for 30 years, Mbaya interrupted, her voice low but firm. "I've seen omens before. This boy needs to be under my roof if he is to survive." Outside, the rain had stopped, but the silence that followed was heavier than the storm. Adissa's heart twisted. Everything in her screamed to snatch the baby away, to run, to hold him against her chest and never let go. But the midwife's reputation in the village was unshakable. No one questioned her judgment. She had saved countless mothers and infants. And yet, when Adissa reached forward again, Mbaya's arms tightened around the baby. Her eyes flickered with something unreadable. Was it fear? Or possession? "This is only for a time," Mbaya said softly now, almost coaxing. "Let me take him. I'll nurse him, watch him, and when it's safe, you'll have him back." The ache in Odysseus' chest was unbearable. Every instinct told her this was wrong. But she was weak from the birth, dizzy from the blood loss. She could barely sit upright. Her sister Zaina put a hand on her shoulder, murmuring, "Let her do what she thinks is best." Odysseus wanted to scream that it wasn't best, but the room was spinning. The last thing she saw before her vision faded was Mbaya's silhouette slipping out the door with the baby, the small bundle moving in her arms. When she woke later that night, her arms were empty. And something deep in her spirit whispered that they might never be full again. The night was heavy with the kind of silence that feels like the whole world is holding its breath. Rain hammered the thatched roof, the smell of wet earth seeping into the cramped hut. Amina lay on the reed mat, sweat dripping down her temples, her breathing ragged. Every contraction tore through her like fire. "Mama Kendi, please," she whispered, her voice trembling. She had trusted the village midwife all her life. After all, Mama Kendi was the one who had brought nearly every child in the village into the world. She was the keeper of life's most fragile moments. Mama Kendi crouched beside her, hands steady but eyes calculating. "Push, my child. Push like the earth is opening," she said, her voice oddly sharp. Amina clenched her jaw, obeying, her nails digging into the mat. Pain ripped through her as she pushed again and again until a wail split the night, a baby's cry, thin but strong. Her heart swelled. She wanted to hold the child, to press him against her chest and breathe in his scent. But Mama Kendi didn't hand him over. Instead, she held the baby close to herself, wrapping him quickly in a faded cloth, her hands moving too fast. "Rest, Amina. You are weak. I will clean him," she murmured, already turning away. Through the haze of exhaustion, Amina frowned. She could barely lift her head, but something in Mama Kendi's movements didn't feel right. The older woman's back was hunched protectively, as though shielding the baby from her own mother's eyes. "Mama Kendi, my baby," Amina croaked, trying to sit up. But the midwife's voice softened. "Too much. Sho. I will take him to the fire, keep him warm. Sleep." The room dimmed as fatigue pulled her under. When she woke hours later, the mat beside her was empty. Mama Kendi sat by the doorway, hands folded, her eyes unreadable. "The baby?" Amina's voice cracked. Mama Kendi's lips curved into something between pity and control. "The spirits have taken him." His breath left before the sun came. Amina felt her heart collapse in her chest. Her scream was swallowed by the storm outside. She curled into herself, sobbing, unaware that somewhere in the village, a baby was being rocked in the midwife's arms, alive and warm. And that night, a secret took root that would grow in shadows for years. 3 weeks after her body had healed enough to leave the hut, Amina walked slowly through the market square, her eyes still hollow from grief. The world moved on as if her loss had never happened. Women haggled over cassava, goats bleated, children played with sticks in the dust. But then she froze. Near the edge of the market, a woman she barely knew, Nyla, stood chatting with 2 other mothers. In her arms, wrapped in a faded cloth, was a newborn. The moment Amina's gaze fell on him, her breath caught. The pattern on the cloth, the exact blue and gold swirls her own grandmother had sewn, was unmistakable. Her eyes traveled upward to the baby's face. Her heart stuttered. The slope of the nose. The deep dimples even in sleep. The tiny birthmark under the left ear, the same one her late father had. Her knees weakened. She gripped the wooden stall beside her for support. "That's a fine boy you have," one of the women was saying to Nyla. Nyla beamed. "Yes. Mama Kendi brought him safely to me. A blessing from the spirits." Amina's blood ran cold. She stepped forward, voice shaking but low. "Nyla, when did you have this child?" Nyla blinked in surprise. "Oh, he is not mine by blood. Mama Kendi said his mother could not keep him, that she had passed on after birth. She said the spirits chose me to raise him." The words hit Amina like stones. Passed on? Could not keep him? Her fingers curled into fists. Her mouth opened to speak, to scream, but Mama Kendi appeared from behind the crowd, her eyes locking on Amina with a warning so sharp it pierced through her rage. In that moment, Amina understood. Speaking now would bring shame, disbelief, and maybe even banishment. She had no proof, only her mother's eyes inside a child's face. She forced herself to turn away, but inside, a vow was taking shape, one that would not rest until the truth saw daylight. Amina didn't speak of what she saw at the market, but silence in a small village is like a drum. It echoes until someone strikes it. Within days the whispers began. "She stared at Nyla's baby too long," an old woman murmured as she pounded millet. "I heard she tried to touch him, but Mama Kendi pulled her away," another said while drawing water. Is it true the child looks like her? A young girl asked, only to be shushed by her mother. The gossip traveled faster than the harmattan wind. In the evenings, Amina would pass by compounds and feel eyes follow her, not with pity anymore but with curiosity wrapped in suspicion. One night as she sat outside her hut, a boy of about 12 came to her. He was breathing hard like he'd run all the way. "Sister Amina, I heard my aunt say something," she said. The baby in Nyla's house came from the same mat Mama Kendi burned last month. Her heart clenched. She remembered that mat, the one she'd bled on during childbirth. She'd been too weak to question why Mama Kendi took it away so quickly. By the next morning, the rumors had twisted into something uglier. She gave birth to a spirit child, someone said near the grinding stone. The elders decided it should be given to another family before it cursed her. Amina bit her lip until she tasted blood. She wasn't sure which hurt more, the lies or the fact that people believed them. But what shook her most was hearing Mama Kendi's voice one afternoon, speaking to a group of women. Not all wombs are meant to keep their harvest. Sometimes the village must choose where the seed will thrive. Every muscle in Amina's body screamed to confront her. Yet she knew one thing, the whispers were planting doubt. Soon, someone else might start asking the questions she couldn't ask alone. She just had to be ready when that day came. The village square had been quiet all morning, but by midday the sound of the talking drum rolled through the air like thunder on dry earth. Everyone knew what it meant, a call to gather, a matter too heavy for private discussion. Amina's hands trembled as she tightened the faded scarf around her head. She told herself she wouldn't go, that it was just another meeting about harvests or water. But her feet betrayed her. Something inside her knew, today the whispers had ripened into a public reckoning. When she reached the square, almost the entire village was there. Women stood in tight clusters, men leaned on their walking sticks and children peeked from behind skirts. At the center sat the elders, a semicircle of wisdom and judgment. Mama Kendi was among them, her chin high, her wrapper a bright, defiant red. The chief's voice boomed. There are matters that weaken the rope of trust in our village. When a child's true origin is doubted, the spirit of the land grows restless. A murmur ran through the crowd. Amina felt her knees soften. An elder rose and pointed his carved staff toward Nyla, who stood holding her baby. Some say this child was given by the gods to heal one home, yet found in another. We must hear the truth. Nyla shifted uncomfortably. Her eyes darted to Mama Kendi, who gave her the smallest nod, the kind that said, "Remember what we agreed." Amina's breath came faster. She wanted to scream, "That is my child." But the chief's gaze swept the crowd, and the words froze in her throat. Then from the back an old midwife stepped forward, bent with age but steady in voice. "I was there the night this child was born. And I know whose cries filled the hut first." Gasps cracked the air like dry firewood. The chief gestured for her to continue. Mama Kendi's jaw tightened. Nyla's grip on the baby faltered. And in that moment the drumbeat changed, from a call to gather, to the pounding rhythm of truth trying to break free. The midwife's voice carried the weight of years, her words measured but sharp enough to cut through the murmurs. "I was the one who caught this child in my hands," she began. It was in Amina's hut, under the small oil lamp that barely fought the darkness. Her cries came first, not from pain but from the joy of life. "I swaddled the baby, placed him on her chest, and left knowing mother and child were safe." The square went still. Even the goats that had been nosing at the edge of the gathering stopped moving. Mama Kendi rose slowly, her face an unreadable mask. "And yet," she said, her voice silky but cold, "a mother who truly gave birth would not abandon her child to another woman's arms." The midwife's eyes narrowed. "No mother abandons willingly. Some are stripped." A ripple of unease spread through the crowd. Nyla's lower lip trembled. She hugged the baby tighter as if holding on to the last rope in a storm. The chief turned to Nyla. "Do you wish to speak?" Nyla's voice was barely a whisper. Mama Kendi said, "Amina was too weak. She told me the baby needed milk and mine was ready. She said it was the only way." Her words broke into sobs. "I did not know she would claim him as her own." The air shifted. Eyes that had once looked at Amina with suspicion now softened. Mama Kendi's posture stiffened, as though the ground beneath her feet had just thinned. Amina's heart pounded, but her voice was steady. "I have been silent because I feared the river of lies would drown me. But today, truth has walked barefoot into this square, and it will not leave unseen." The chief's staff struck the earth once. "This matter is not yet closed. Tomorrow we gather again. And the spirits will judge alongside us." The crowd began to disperse, but the air felt charged, as though something larger than them all had just taken its first breath. The next morning, the village gathered by the river, the place where oaths were sealed and lies were believed to be carried away by the current. The chief stood beneath the large acacia tree, his staff planted firmly in the sand. Beside him, the elders formed a half-circle, their faces solemn. Amina stood on one side, her hands clasped before her. Nyla stood on the other, clutching the baby as if her heart beat in his tiny chest. Mama Kendi was in the middle, her head wrapped in a bright scarf, her eyes darting between the crowd and the water as though searching for an escape. The chief spoke first. The river holds no patience for deception. Today we will speak our truths before it. And if the water rejects your words, the village will know. One by one the elders called the witnesses. The midwife repeated her story, her voice unwavering. A woman who had been in Mama Kendi's hut the night Amina gave birth confirmed the cries she had heard. Even an old neighbor spoke up. She had seen Mama Kendi carry the baby away before sunrise, her face hidden beneath a shawl. Finally it was Mama Kendi's turn. She stepped forward, her lips pressed into a thin line. I raised him when his mother was too weak. I fed him when she could not. I did what I thought was right. The chief's gaze did not waver. And yet you claimed him as your own. That is not right. That is theft, of blood, of name, of truth. The river's surface rippled, though there was no wind. Amina took a slow step forward. You cannot wash a mother's bond away. No matter the lies, the river returns what was stolen. She opened her arms. Nyla hesitated, tears streaming down her cheeks. Then, with trembling steps, she crossed the sand and placed the baby in Amina's embrace. The crowd exhaled as one, a sound that carried both relief and sorrow. Mama Kendi's shoulders sank. She did not fight. The strength in her defiance had drained like water through cracked earth. She turned away from the river, walking back toward the village alone, her bright scarf catching the sun one last time before the path swallowed her. Amina held her son, her voice breaking with a promise only the river and the spirits could witness. You will know your name. You will know your truth. And as the river flowed on, the village whispered that no matter how far a lie travels, the truth will always find its way home.